Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Pension Awareness Month. My name is Catherine Murray. I'm the Training and Engagement Manager from my CSP, and I'm joined today by two of my team, Helen Shrimpton and Joe McLaughlin, and we're going to guide you through the journey of your civil service pension. So Pension Awareness Month is designed to give you time to focus on your pension and the road ahead to retirement. Today's session focuses on how you can keep up to date with your civil service pension and other pension benefits and key things that you need to know. No matter how far away your retirement may be, it's never too early to start thinking about it. So in today's session, we're going to give you some idea of the income that you might need in retirement as a guideline to aid you in starting that plan. We'll also focus on life events and the difference that they can make to your pension. A large part of today's session will be a question and answer session, so do please use the Q&A function to pop in any questions that you may have. And if you see any questions you'd like to know the answer to, then please use the upvote function to vote for those questions, and we'll do our best to answer as many of those questions as we can at the end of today's session. So to get today's session underway, I'm now going to pass you over to Helen, who's going to begin and start taking you on your journey. Over to you, Helen.
Thank you very much, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to this Pension Awareness Month session. This session is called On Your Journey. So we're going to be looking at the journey that someone may take when they are considering retirement. Retirement can be a little bit scary. It doesn't have to be, though. So today's session is going to take you through the process and things that you might need to consider before you actually take that step into retirement. So I am just going to share some slide presentations with you all so we can have a look at what we're going to talk about. So firstly, it's really important to consider how to keep track of your pensions. Now, luckily, there's lots of ways that you can do this, not only for your civil service pension, but also for any other pensions that you might wish to draw on for your retirement. You might be looking at private pensions or other occupational pensions that you might be entitled to. So we'll give you some information about how you can find that information. Then we'll have a look at what retirement income you might need in retirement. Of course, that's going to be personal to everybody, but there's some useful information that you can use to discover how much income you may need. We'll also look about how life events such as getting married or changing your working hours or even becoming divorced might affect the pension that you will be entitled to. And we'll also have a focus on what happens if you do then become too ill to carry on in work and what sort of retirement you could opt for in the civil service in that situation. Finally, we'll have a look at how to create your retirement plan and the things that you might need to consider before you take that step into retirement. So firstly, for the civil service pension scheme, the best way to keep an eye on your pension and understand what you're entitled to at retirement is to use the civil service pension portal. It's a really useful tool for you to manage your own civil service arrangements. If you haven't already registered for the portal, we recommend that you do so. And to do that, you visit civilservicepensionscheme.org.uk and simply click register for the portal. It should be on the homepage of the Civil Service Pension Scheme website. For first-time registration, you'll need to have the following things to hand. So you'll need to have your national insurance number, your date of birth, the name of your current employer, and also a mobile phone number ready because there will be two-factor authentication that you need to set up. And then you simply follow the step-by-step instructions to create a username and password. Make sure your username is unique to you. I'm sure you can imagine there's lots of Mr. J. Smiths or Mrs. M. Jones, so make sure your username is unique. Once you are registered onto the portal, there's lots of things that you can do. So you can check and update your death benefit nominees. If the worst was to happen and you were to pass away in the civil service, your nominated person or persons can receive a one-off lump sum, which is a calculation of your final pensionable earnings. But in order for that payment to be made, you must have someone nominated on your record. In the Alpha pension scheme, you can have more than one person nominated, and you can proportional that differently as well as you so desire. On the portal as well, you can also check your personal details, so things like making sure your name and address is up to date. And of course, you can also view your annual benefits statement. Now, your annual benefits statement is a snapshot of the pension benefits that you've built up within the last scheme year. And you can then review previous statements from previous years so you can compare how your pension has accrued year on year. There's also a pre-populated retirement modeler, which is a calculator that you can use to do some estimates for your pension. The modeler is pre-populated with information supplied by your employer in terms of your pay history and your service history, and you can use the sliding scales on the modeler to do some estimates about your pension and lump sum. So if you have already registered for the portal before, but then when you go to log in, you're finding that you can't log in or there is any issues, remember you can only register for the portal once. So if you think you have already registered but forgotten your details, quite simply click forgot username or forgot password. You'll then be sent a recovery code to the information that you first registered with. If you do have any further issues, you can always contact us to the portal, but just include a screenshot of what's happening when you've tried to log on, and also make sure you identify yourself as well. So give your national insurance number, name, date of birth, address, and your service dates as well, so our team can then help you. So as I mentioned before, once you're registered onto the portal, you can look at your annual benefits statement and your pre-populated retirement modeler. So the retirement modeler is pre-populated using figures from your last annual benefit statement. So everyone who is eligible to receive a 2023 benefit statement should already have theirs loaded onto the portal. And like I say, your retirement modeler is what you can use to do some estimates for your pension. It is an estimate, we do have to stress that. So it's based on the information from your last benefit statement, but it's a good idea to take a look at the modeler in regular points to see how your pension benefits and what you're going to be entitled to when you retire. So that's for the civil service pension, but you may be thinking about any other pension benefits that you might be entitled to. Now, of course, we are all human, and we may have forgotten where we've put in those details for any private pensions or occupational pensions that we may have had. But luckily, there's a really useful service run by the UK government called the Pension Tracing Service, and this will help you to locate any misplaced pensions. So whether that's an occupational pension or a private pension, you simply go to the email address stated on the slide there, and then type in some basic details. The Pension Tracing Service should then point you towards the correct pension provider to make your inquiries to. So just to give you a few little stats and figures about keeping track of your pension, it's estimated that about 1.6 billion lost workplace pension pots are out there that people haven't yet claimed that they are actually entitled to. And that equates to around £19.4 billion in lost pension benefits. So it's really important to make sure you're doing your research, using the Pension Tracing Service and looking at any previous paperwork that you might have kept hold of about any other pensions that you may be entitled to. The average size of a lost pension pot is around £13,000, so it's really important to ensure that you're claiming everything that you are entitled to. Of course, then there's no reasons not to look into this and to do your retirement research. There is also another pension that you might want to consider as part of your total retirement income. That, of course, is your state pension. So your state pension is, of course, what you pay your national contributions towards. The current state weekly pension, this is the full pension, is £203.85 a week. And you should also check your national insurance record to see what you're entitled to as well. So in order to receive your state pension, you must have reached your state pension age, which again, you can check on the government website. You must have made national insurance contributions for a full 35 years to receive that full state pension. Now, you may have heard of this in the news or on articles recently, but the government is proposing what we call a pensions dashboard. So to help you keep track of your pensions, so pensions dashboards will transform how savers access their pension facts and figures, and it will allow people to see what they've got in their various pensions, including their state pension, in one single place online at any time that they choose. Now, the proposed launch of this is going to be in October of 2026. So that still doesn't mean that you shouldn't do your own research and look into all your other pensions that you may be entitled to, but the pensions dashboard is something to be aware of. And like I say, the launch of that is expected to be in October of 2026. So what sort of retirement income may you need? That can be a little bit difficult to work out, but luckily there's lots of helpful things that can help you to work this. Now, the Retirement Living Standards is put together by the Pension and Lifetime Savings Association, and it's there to urge retirement savers to consider what outgoings you anticipate in retirement. So things you might need to consider will be your housing costs, any food bills, transport costs, any costs for holidays or leisure time, and also any costs that you might want to consider for helping others. Maybe you've got children that you want to help on the property ladder, or you may have care and responsibilities for elderly parents, and you might need to factor in cost for that as well. So what sort of income may you need when you retire? So the retirement living standards are broken down into 3 types of standards. First of all, there is a minimum standard. What we mean by minimum standard is that the basics are covered, but there's a little bit of disposable income left over. We might look at maybe a holiday in the UK once a year. For a single person, it's estimated around £12,800 is needed, and for a couple, around £19,900 will be needed for a standard retirement income. Then for a moderate standard, so again, all the basics are covered, but we have got a little bit more flexibility. Maybe we're looking at maybe a holiday abroad once a year. For a single person, around £23,300 needed, and for a couple, around £34,000 needed. Then for a comfortable retirement standard, so again, the basics are covered, but there is a lot more disposable income, a bit more financial freedom, and a bit more income left over for some luxuries. So maybe we're talking a couple of holidays once a year abroad, and maybe we're talking about some disposable income left over for further house improvements. It's going to be totally dependent on your own personal circumstances. But again, for a single person, maybe around £37,300 needed, and for a couple, as you can see, that's that for the couple's retirement standard. So again, that's going to be completely reflective on your own needs, but it's just to give you some sort of example of what you may need. Of course, you can do your own research and have a look at retirementlivingstandards.org.uk for further information. So what you might want to do when you're doing your retirement planning is sit down one night. It might seem a little bit boring, but sometimes when it's down on paper, it makes your workings out of the retirement income you may need a little bit easier. So what you might want to do is sit down one night, draw up a little document or a piece of paper with your possible outgoings in retirement. So again, we're looking at household bills, personal bills, or weekly food bills, and then compare that to the possible income you will have from all your retirement income. So that would be your civil service pension, a state pension, any other pensions that you might be entitled to, any previous occupational or private pensions. You might also be entitled to some benefit support. There may be property that you can use as part of your retirement income, and any other investments. So sometimes just having it down on paper in front of you helps the retirement planning go a little bit smoother.
Thanks, Helen. That was great. It's really useful to see those figures for expected income in retirement, and then looking at your personal circumstances and trying to apply those using the tools that are available to see what your pension might look like in the future and if it's going to meet those needs. We've got lots of questions coming through, so thank you for those. Just a note to say that if you are asking questions about your personal circumstances, we're not going to be able to answer those on the call today. We have got quite a lot of people on today's session. The best way to get in touch with the scheme is to use the Contact Us form that's available on the Contact Us page of the Civil Service Pension Scheme website. So do think about using that if you've got personal questions that you need the answer to. And another way to get your burning questions answered also is to think about attending one of our Pension Power sessions. We run these webinars every single weekday. It's a 1-hour session that gives you an overview of the Civil Service Pension Scheme, and they're in quite small groups of sort of 30 to 40 people. So there's lots of opportunity to ask questions and have your answers on those sessions as well. So if you haven't attended Pension Power before, then it's definitely worthwhile taking an hour out at some point in the future, so you can do that. Okay, so I'm going to pass you now over to Joe, who's going to talk about life events and how they can impact on your pension benefits. So over to you, Joe.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this. As Catherine just talked about, I'm now going to move over to have a look at some life events and some key things that might influence your pension as you move forward. Pensions very much reflect your career, things that happen to you in life, and a lot of big life events have a significant knock-on to your pension. So things like part-time work, lots of people move to part-time work, particularly towards the end of their career. We'll have a talk about that in a second, about what that might mean. Sickness is something that, of course, can affect any of us at any point. That also may have an impact. Maternity and paternity also may impact your pension in different ways. Career breaks, ill health, being in a position where you can't afford to contribute, and of course death may have an impact on that in terms of what's payable to who and what you need to consider in terms of that cover as well. One of the first things we'll look at is part-time work, and that impacts you slightly differently depending on what scheme you're in, or certainly were in previously. Now, in the final salary schemes, Classic, Classic Plus and Premium, the impact of part-time work was slightly different from how it will affect you in Nuvos and Alpha. For example, in Classic, Classic Plus and Premium, part-time work is very much reflected in the reckonable service that you have. Now, as everybody's now moved to Alpha, it's not something you need to worry about now, but historically, if you did have part-time work, it will have impacted that pension. The way it impacts those pension is it's reflected in your reckonable service. So the amount of service that you build up over that period is proportionate to the hours that you actually worked. For example, somebody who's been in the job for 10 years, working full-time, will have about 10 years reckonable service. Somebody who's been working in the job part-time, say doing 2.5 days a week, will have about 5 years. And we'll look at an actual example of that in a second to flesh that out on screen. In the career average schemes, Nuvos and Alpha, this is reflected in your actual earnings. These schemes use your earnings to calculate your pension, and because you're earning less in that year, it means you'll earn a bit less pension. Again, we'll look at an example in a second as to how that works. So, for those final salary schemes, again, Classic, Classic Plus and Premium, how does that impact your pension? So we have Connor, he's in the Classic scheme, and he decided to reduce his hours to 18.5 hours per week as opposed to his full-time 37. He works this pattern for exactly 1 year. His reckonable service would then be calculated as follows: 18.5 times 365 divided by 37 would equal 183 days. So instead of a full year of reckonable service, he's got about half a year instead. We would, though, use his full-time equivalent pay to calculate his final benefits. Now, for the career average schemes, we'll look at Sarah. Sarah joins Alpha on the 1st of April 2021 and has pensionable earnings of £22,000. So in her first full year, she accrues an annual pension of £510.40. That's 22,000 times 2.32%. She then, though, reduces her hours from 37 to 22 hours per week, and that reduces her pensionable earnings to £12,980. That means in her second year, she accrues an Alpha pension of £301.14 to £12,980 times 2.32. So we can see a direct impact there of going part-time and how much we've earned in that particular year. Now, maternity, paternity and sick leave can also all impact on your pension. Paid maternity, paternity and sick leave will count towards your pension as normal. Half pay maternity, paternity and sick leave also counts towards your pension in most circumstances, but any unpaid maternity, paternity or sick leave will not count towards your pension. Historically, that may have meant in terms of service. For the more modern schemes like Alpha, that would have a direct knock-on in terms of your earnings for that year, and therefore how much pension again you'll earn in that year. Now, some people may also go on career breaks throughout their service. That means they are then unable to contribute to the pension scheme, and that will count as a non-pensionable break in service. So that period of service again will not count towards their pension. You're also unable to purchase top-up options whilst on a career break, so it's effectively a suspension until you return into paid work. May also end up in the position where you can't afford to contribute. And in those situations, you may be thinking about dropping out of the scheme altogether and opting out, but you will be losing some benefits in doing so. For example, you're losing the annual pension. That would be paid for life and guaranteed by the government, so do consider that carefully in terms of your way in the future. Also lose those tax relief on contributions and also death benefit and ill health provision cover as well. That can be critical in terms of the kind of cover and the way that you're building benefits for the future. Now, if you can't afford to contribute, there are a few other things to consider. One of the key ones is partnership. You do have the option of joining the partnership scheme instead, where you can choose a contribution rate of 0. Your employer will always pay into that scheme for you on a percentage rate based on your age. The partnership scheme is quite different. You do need to be aware of that as well. It's an investment-based scheme, so contributions paid in are invested for you, and it's how well those investment options do that determine what you'll get back. So there is an element of risk to partnership that wouldn't be present in the main schemes. You do also in partnership get a variety of flexible access options, as well as control over where and how your money is invested. All of these things you'll want to consider in depth before switching to partnership. You can read up more on the scheme website as to exactly how that scheme works. Now, we'll also consider ill health retirement. If your health deteriorates to the point where you're unable to work, you may be able to get your pension paid early without reductions or possibly even with enhancements. We're essentially looking at somebody that is in a position where they can no longer continue working either in their current job or in any form of gainful employment. If you're in the position where you can no longer do your current job, you'd be considered for what's called lower tier. And if you're successful in being assessed by the scheme medical advisor, will pay out your pension in full immediately for the rest of your life. If you're so ill that you're considered unfit for any kind of gainful employment, you'll be considered for upper tier. And in those circumstances, we'll actually look at the pension you've built up so far, but also the pension you would have built up if you'd continued until pension age. We'll then pay out the full value of that pension immediately for the rest of your life. Your employer plays a key part in this role. You'll need to have these conversations with your employer, and they should be helping you through this process if you're in that position already. To qualify for ill health retirement, though, you must have at least 2 years service. Also, that breakdown in health must be considered permanent. In those circumstances, again, you'll go for an independent medical assessment. They will advise you of the criteria and undertake that assessment for you. Now, in the event of your death, there's also a few things to consider in terms of the cover you and loved ones may receive. In terms of the lump sum that may be payable, this is payable to a person or people of your choice. You can change that nomination through your pensions portal account or using a nomination form that's available on the website. You can nominate anyone for that lump sum, and that can be multiple people. Previously, members of Classic could only nominate one person. You can now nominate multiple people and specify a percentage for each as you see fit. You can also nominate one organisation, which would often be a charity, to receive some or all of that if you want to as well. If you die in service, the benefit payable is normally 2 times your pay that would be payable to the beneficiaries you've told us about. Dying out of service, we'd normally pay you something like 5 times your pension, but less any pension that's already been paid out. Now, we can also pay pensions to dependents, be that an adult partner or a child. For partners, this is an ongoing pension paid to that person for the rest of their life in most cases, and it's based usually on somewhere between 37 and 50% of your pension. In some cases that may be increased. The exact circumstances, of course, will depend on your circumstances. It's also worth noting that in the Classic scheme, this can only be to a marital or civil partner. Classic does not recognise long-term partners. Premium, Nuvos and Alpha recognise marital partners, civil partners and long-term partners, providing it's an exclusive relationship and you are financially dependent on each other as well. If you do have a partner, we'd ask that you complete a partner details form to help us identify who that person is. You should also note that the pension paid is not dependent on the lump sums that you've taken that may have affected the value of your pension. It's always based on the maximum rate that's available. Now, for children, this is payable to any child that was dependent on you at the date of your death. This can therefore be children in your care as well as your own children. And we'll pay a portion of your pension to that child up until the age of 17 in classic or 18 in the other schemes. If that child is remaining full-time education, though, that can remain up until 23. Should also note, if that child is incapable of work through any kind of physical or mental impairment or disability, then we'll usually pay that child's pension for life in those circumstances. A few things to think about in the build up to retirement, or things to think about ahead at any point really. If you haven't already attended a pension power session, we'll spend an hour going through all the basics of your pension with you and take questions during those sessions. They're free to attend and you can find them through the MyCSP website. Do register for the pensions portal. On there you'll get access to a variety of different information, including benefit statements and the retirement modeler. And the next point is to use that benefit statement and retirement modeler, which will let you have a play around with your potential options in the build up to retirement. Consider carefully your other income. Things like state pension or older pensions that you might have will be important in terms of planning where you may be going in the future. If you have lost track of those pensions, you can use the pension tracing service to track down older pensions. Also, carefully compare your outgoings to your total expected income. Think carefully about where you'll be after retirement, what money you'll have coming in, and what you'd expect to have going out. Bearing in mind that could be very different from how your weekly outgoings look at the moment. Refer back to the retirement living standards. That will give you some good ideas about things to consider in planning and making those options. Make sure that you'll have enough. Consider any top-up options you might need ahead of time as far as possible. Make sure your death benefit nomination is up to date. It's easy for that to get forgotten or lost over the years. Also consider the DWP midlife MOT. There's a link there on screen where you can get more guidance on things to consider partway through your career. And of course, always be careful about arranging your last day of service with your employer to make sure that you're leaving sufficient time to get everything in place and that you're ready to go. So at this point, I will hand back to Catherine. I hope that was useful.
Thanks, Joe. That was really useful. It's really interesting to see the impact of all of those things that affect all of us on your pension. But now we're going to get to your questions, which I know is what a lot of people enjoy, and you really want to have your personal questions answered. So we've published quite a lot of your questions. We've got an awful lot more still coming through, so thank you very much. I'll come to Helen with the first question, which is the most upvoted. Someone's asked how they can get an accurate estimate of partial retirement if I have both classic and alpha pensions. The spreadsheet, I'm guessing they're referring to the partial retirement calculator available on the scheme website, currently only has an option for one pension. So a little bit more about the portal for you to answer and the retirement modeler for you to answer there. Helen, over to you.
Of course. So if you are using the partial retirement calculator, that is a preset spreadsheet that's available on the Civil Service Pension website. And you're quite right, it can only reflect the Classic Plus Premium or Nuvos pensions. It doesn't have the capability to work out an alpha pension. But if you're using that pre-retirement calculator, you're actually inputting the details manually. However, all that information, including your alpha pension, is actually available on the pre-populated retirement modeler. So you can actually use your modeler to do some estimates for pre-retirement, because it will have your up-to-date earnings and your service within both schemes. So what you can do is, once you're on the pre-populated retirement modeler, if you are in fact a dual member and you have both a final salary element and a career average element to your pension, you can use the retirement modeler and you should see a split. It might say here is your classic pension, for example, and then underneath that it may say here is your alpha pension. So you can still use the pre-populated retirement modeler to do some estimates for partial retirement, and if it's your choice to take just some or all of the pension benefits at partial retirement, you can use the modeler to do so. You'd still set it at your retirement age that you desire, and you can also make options for lump sum as well. I hope that's helped.
Thanks, Helen. That was great. We're going to come to Jo with the next question, which is about the 2015 remedy or the McLeod judgment. So we haven't talked about that yet in today's session. Some of the sessions we have running next week for people closer to retirement do have sections focused on the 2015 remedy. So hopefully you signed up to attend one of those. But remember, they will be recorded and available online after the event if you need to. This question we've got here. So those of us affected by the McLeod judgment still don't have a reliable estimate of what our pensions may now look like several years after the judgment came out. As someone within 9 years of retirement date for their original civil service pension, this is becoming increasingly frustrating. Any advice on how we can effectively plan our retirements in these circumstances? So we've got some information coming up, which Jo can explain for you.
Thank you very much. So, as Catherine's mentioned, there's sessions coming up on this that will go into this in more detail. So I'm not going to be exhaustive on this subject, not least because we could probably talk around the houses all day on McLeod and the 2015 remedy. There are, though, a few things that you can consider that will help you in the meantime. There's also something I'm going to just point out that might set your mind at ease slightly as well about where we'll be in the not too distant future. Now, remedy or McLeod has obviously had a big impact on all civil service pensions. It's a big change. There's a lot of things going on, and both in terms of how you are understanding your pension and in terms of what we're dealing with as an administrator, there's a lot going on, and it is unsettling. There's a lot of things to think about. Now, in terms of figuring out where you might be, there's a couple of different options. Now, I think you said it was about 9 years before you're going. There's a slightly different position for people that may be going a little bit sooner than that. So for people that are going in the near future, they will be starting to get those options only as they leave. There is, though, a modeler that's available on the Civil Service Pensions website that will map out what your 7-year option period might look like. It's not there to calculate the whole thing, but for people in the interim period, it will do you a quick calculation of what your 7-year option might look like, and that will give you some idea about what you're looking at before you get your actual options. Now, for those people going further down the line, there are plans in place, things in motion to get more information out to you on a regular basis so that you can get a feel for where those options are going. And what you'll see is from April next year, your calculator online, the retirement model that Helen's already referred to, and your benefit statement will start to show you both sets of options each year. So from next year, your benefit statement will show you roughly what both options are looking like. And the retirement model will show you both options as you change the circumstances on that as well. So if you're not going for 9 years, by the time you do go, you'll have had 6, 7 or 8 versions of those options that will be updated every year. So by the time you need to make that choice, you'll already have a pretty good idea about where those options are heading. And that will basically mean by the time you come to make those options, you should be pretty comfortable with what that's looking like for your personal circumstances. It is worth noting those figures do change year on year. They're all affected by how your salary changes and what inflation is doing. So we can't give you definitive options now, but we will be giving you a process that will help you identify where you're heading. So in 9 years' time, you should be pretty comfortable with that by the time you need to actually make that decision. Again, there'll be more sessions on that this week, so you can follow up on that there. There's loads more information online that will talk to you about how those options are going to affect you. And again, Pension Power sessions, we talk through these all the time as well, if you have any further questions. So I hope that's helped and put your mind at ease slightly, and I'll hand back to Catherine.
Thanks, Jo. That was great. So yeah, the retirement modeler and annual benefit statements will be updated from 2024 to include the 2015 remedy. In the short term, we've got the retirement benefit illustrator or RBI tool that's available on the scheme website to give you an early indication if you do want to know what those benefits might look like for the 7-year remedy period. And if you're unsure whether you're impacted by the remedy or not, there is also the Am I Affected tool available on the scheme website that you can use, so you can work out whether you're likely to be impacted by that or not. It doesn't impact absolutely everybody, but absolutely it does impact quite a large proportion of the membership. Okay, so let's have a look at some more questions. We'll come to Helen with the next question, and this is on lump sums and whether they're tax-free or not at retirement. So can you advise what the maximum tax-free lump sum is that you can take? I thought it was all tax-free, but apparently you pay tax after a certain amount. Lots of myths and rumours going around. So Helen, can you shed some light on this for us, please?
Sure. So you're right. There is a lot of rumours and myths regarding lump sums. It's the bit we all get excited about when we come to retire. How much lump sum can I have? How can I plan my holiday? What am I going to pay things off? So a lump sum is tax-free. You can have up to 25% of your total pension value paid to you as a tax-free lump sum. Now, your retirement modeller will actually help you to work out how much lump sum you will be entitled to. So on the retirement modeller, there is a lump sum sliding scale. You could set it at 0 lump sum, or you could set it to 100% of the maximum lump sum permitted, and the modeller will reflect those figures for you. So like I say, up to 25% of your total pension value can be paid to you as a tax-free lump sum. If you have reached that allowance, then you are notified as to the amount of tax that may be payable. But for most civil servants, they get a lump sum tax-free. Of course, it is all dependent on your own circumstances. So use that retirement modeller sliding scale to set the amount of lump sum that you would like. Remember, you don't have to take the maximum amount of lump sum. You could opt for somewhere below the maximum, but then your pension will be adjusted accordingly. So for some pension schemes, for example, the Alpha pension scheme, your lump sum doesn't come as a standard. So you will need to opt to give up part of your pension to have a lump sum when you retire. So you would have a reduced pension for more lump sum at retirement. And like I say, use the sliding scale on the modeller to do some reflections for yourself. I hope that's helped. Back to you, Catherine.
Thanks, Helen. Yeah, that's great. There's lots of confusion around that. The retirement modeller, when you look at the lump sum on there, it does say 100% of the maximum available, and that's your maximum tax-free lump sum. There are other kinds of pension schemes out there that will pay you taxable lump sum, but as a general rule, the civil service pension scheme doesn't do that. All of your lump sum payable from your civil service pension is tax-free. So let's move on to our next question. This is on taking Alpha pension benefits early. So question for you, Jo. If I take my Alpha pension 7 years early, does that mean a 28 to 30% early reduction penalty? Can you shed some light on that for us, please, Jo?
I'll certainly do my best. So I'll expand that question slightly just to talk about taking your pension early from any scheme. And essentially, each scheme has a normal pension age. Now, in the older schemes, that's fixed at 60 or 65 for NUVOS. And in Alpha, it's your state pension age, which will be somewhere between 65 and 68 under current terms. Now, you can take your pension before that date. In some cases, as early as 50, but certainly in most cases from 55 onwards. If you do take your pension early, it is going to be reduced. It's being paid for more years than it's funded and designed to be. And therefore a reduction will be made to count for the fact that it's been paid for more years. Now, if your NUVOS pension, your Alpha pension age is 67 and you want to claim at 60, that's 7 years early, and a reduction will be made accordingly. Now, the exact reduction that's made is based on exactly how early you are claiming that, and it's a sliding scale. The reduction works out, depending on your exact circumstances, at somewhere between 4 and 5% per year, depending on your age and the scheme that you're in. In those circumstances, if you're thinking about taking your pension early, you can use the online calculators to work out that reduction for you. And also the retirement modeller should work out that reduction as well. Each year longer or each period longer that you wait to get nearer to your pension age, the less that reduction will be. So the earlier you claim it, the bigger the reduction. If you wait nearer to your retirement age, the lower that reduction will be. In any circumstance, of course, you're getting that pension paid for longer than you would have done. There's loads more guidance about this available online, and the calculators will work this out for you specifically. But yeah, broadly speaking, you're right, your pension will be reduced for that period. You can find out the specific reductions online. I hope that's answered your question, and I will pass back to Catherine.
Thanks, Jo. Great answer. So yeah, lots of people interested in taking their pension benefits early, which is always an option for you. So it's good to know the details, and the retirement modeller does all of the workings out for you, so you don't need to do them yourselves. Let's have a look. The next question I'm going to ask, there's a couple of repeats, I think, of things we've already covered. So just scrolling through to what else we've got. So if I continue to work after age 60, but do not partially retire, can I claim the classic portion of my pension? Helen, can you give us some guidance on what the options are available to a member in that circumstance?
Okay. So if you are a dual member, for example, you have both classic and Alpha elements together, Both of those elements together will equal your total pension, but because there's two elements to your pension, that could mean two different normal pension ages, depending on the schemes that you're in, and also two potentials to have lump sum as well. Partial retirement, I'll just unpack that question a little bit. So partial retirement's quite popular with civil servants, as it's a way to access some or all of your civil service pension and continue to work in the civil service. But some people in the scheme who are claiming some of their civil service pension, you need to be aware of something called abatement. So abatement may apply to a civil service pension if the pension that you are in receipt of, once you've claimed that pension, plus your civil service salary, if both of those figures together equal more than what you were earning before you claimed your pension, then your pension may become abated, so suspended. So it's just worth bearing that in mind, that if you're in receipt of a civil service pension and you continue to work in the civil service and receive a civil service salary, that pension may be abated. So there is a very useful guide on the Civil Service Pension Scheme website about the factors that would affect abatement. So if you are considering claiming some of your pension and continuing to work in the civil service, just be aware of these of abatement and the factors that may affect it. So of course it's completely your choice, but it's just worth something bearing in mind. If you're receiving a civil service pension and you're working for the civil service, those two figures together combined couldn't be more than what you were earning before you claimed your pension. Hope that's helped. Back to you, Catherine.
Thanks, Helen. That's great. Our next most voted question, I think we've already answered. So will the 2015 remedy be taken into account on the retirement modeller in October or later? So just to confirm, we are working on getting the modeller updated with the 2015 remedy. We don't have an exact date for that as of yet, but certainly before annual benefit statements are issued next summer, it will definitely be updated by that point, but hopefully a bit sooner. But we haven't got an exact date for that yet, but certainly we'll send some communications out, and there'll be lots of information on the scheme website when we have it, when that's ready for you to utilise. Okay. So the next question I'm going to come to Jo with is from a member who advises they've lost about 7 years of reckonable service due to being part-time for about 15 years. Is there any way of getting those 7 years back, or perhaps doing something to work out the equivalent amount of pension? So Jo, if you can give us some information around that, that'd be great.
So in terms of losing or certainly not having as much service as you could do, in this case 7 years, there's a few different things you could consider. Now, one of the first things, one of the last things that was in that question was in terms of how much pension you've lost, and is it possible to work that out? And I'll start with that bit first. It's not always very easy to work that out exactly, but you can certainly work out roughly what that pension was worth by applying the rules of that particular scheme. And don't think it said in the question what scheme it was, but for example, if that was classic, you could work out 7 years of classic by simply 7 years times your current pay divided by 80, and that would give you a rough idea about what amount of pension you've lost. If you needed further help on that, of course, you can always get in touch with us. Now, once you know how much pension you're potentially losing, you can then have a think about how to replace that, and there's a variety of different options that are available to you. The first, and generally speaking most straightforward, is buying added pension, and this is where you can buy an extra amount of added pension for by paying extra monthly contributions or by paying a lump sum once per year. So if you know, let's say you're about £2,000 a year down, you can use the added pension calculator online to work out roughly what that would cost you, and you can pay that in a one-off lump sum if you're feeling particularly flush, bearing in mind you'll get a tax break on that, of course, as well. Or you can then arrange to pay that back over a number of years, and it may or may not be practical depending on what your circumstances are, and or you may even choose to buy more, but that's certainly one direct way of doing that. There's also the method of AVCs. Now, AVCs are an investment-based method of top-up. This wouldn't allow you to easily replicate the exact amount that you've lost, but it's certainly a method of supplementing or increasing your pension alongside with a pot that's investment based through Legal in General. Any contributions you pay into that pot benefit from tax breaks and increase through investments. And if you have that invested for a period of time, that will then buy you some extra pension on top. It's difficult to know exactly where your investments are going, so it's hard to replicate that lost amount exactly, but it does also give you some more flexibility in terms of when and how you can claim that fund, and that can be attractive in some circumstances. In those circumstances, I think those are probably your two main options. I hope that's answered your question. Do look at more guidance on added pension and AVCs online to help flesh that out. and I'll pass back to Catherine for the next question.
Thanks, Joe. That was really helpful. Lots of people interested in always boosting their pension benefits, and there's always lots of options available to you. A couple of questions I'm going to come to Helen with now from a member. Looks like they've submitted 2 questions. So if you're in Classic and Alpha, does the modeller use a pre-populated combined pension figure and assume you will be taking both Classic and Alpha pensions at the same time age? And then the further question just asked slightly differently about how it works if you want to take the Alpha and Classic pensions together or you want to take them separately. What options exist and where can members get the information they need? Over to you, Helen.
So in terms of the question, I'm just going to unpack that a little bit. So as I mentioned before, on your pre-populated retirement modeller, if you're a dual member, you've got both Classic and Alpha elements of your pension together. Remember, both those figures together would equal your total retirement income. So on the retirement modeller, if you have both elements together, you should see it split down. There's a little section just to the right of the sliding scales where you will see the split between your Classic and Alpha pension. So if you set your retirement age, let's say, for example, 60, that means the Classic side of that pension is going to be payable in full because you would have reached your normal pension age. However, there would be a reduction if you were claiming your Alpha pension at that age, because remember, that would be under your normal pension age for Alpha, which is your state pension age. So you could decide to take all of those pension benefits together, or you could opt to just take one element of that pension benefit. For example, if you just wanted to claim the Classic part of your pension, but not claim the Alpha part, that's your choice when you come to retire, and you'll notify us on your paperwork about which pension element you want to put into payment. But we will do a calculation for both sets at that stage. So in terms of how to work that out, like I say, I would always refer back to the retirement modeller and have a look at the splits, and you'll see the different splits. So you'll see the Classic element depending on the age that you set your retirement age for. You'll also see your Alpha element. And remember, if you do decide to claim any part of your pension below your normal pension age, it could be subject to a reduction. As Joe said, in very general terms, a pension is reduced by around 3 to 4% between 4 and 5% per year for each year it's claimed early. So the best thing to do, like I say, have a look at the retirement modeller, have a look at those splits. If you are deciding to partially retire, for example, you might just want to claim one element of your pension at partial retirement, but then leave the other elements until you then fully retire, and then you've got a full pension that you can claim on top of the pension that you've already claimed at partial. So the choice is really up to you, but I would certainly use that retirement modeller and have a look at the 2 splits. So I hope that's answered your question, and back to Catherine.
Thanks, Helen. That was great. So yeah, lots of questions about that. There's another one I can just see in the chat there, which says, can I take my Classic at 60 and my Alpha portion at 67? Yeah, absolutely. Whether it's full retirement or partial retirement, then you are able to take both parts of your pension separately or at the same time. As Helen explained, it's entirely up to you. And we've got another question asking, is the pension modeller accurate? So I'm just going to pick that up quickly. So in short, yeah, absolutely. So the really important thing to look at with the retirement modeller is it is all based on the information that's contained within your annual benefit statement. All efforts are made to ensure that the information on your annual benefit statement is correct, and therefore we're going to project your benefits based on that. Obviously, projections, they're a little bit unknown. We don't know how your salary is going to change in the future. We can't predict future rates of inflation, but it's absolutely as accurate as we can make it. But it's really important that you play your part in that and thoroughly check that annual benefit statement every year and make sure you're confident the information contained within it is right. So check what the pay figure looks like. Does that reflect your circumstances? Does the length of service look to be correct? As long as that information is correct, then you can be confident that the information in the retirement modeller is giving you as an accurate projection as we possibly can. Okay, so another question about pension and tax. So the question is, how much tax do we pay on our pension and our lump sum when retiring at pension age? So Joe, could you just explain a little bit about how pensions are taxed for us, please?
Certainly. So there's a few things to consider here. I'll talk about the pension side first. So pension is essentially a form of income, and it's subject to income tax. That's the same income tax that you get currently on your salary now. One of the things you want to take into consideration is that will be all sources of income. So as well as your pension from us, you might have other forms of income that might be from other pensions. You might take a job elsewhere, for example. You might have some kind of income from your fleet of racehorses that you're running in the background. Anything like that is all going to count towards your primary source of income. So in total, all of those things will count towards your general tax position. And it's the same progression, same margins as will be used against your salary now. Now, in terms of the lump sum side, pension lump sums are, from our scheme, always tax-free. We don't permit you to take any amount of lump sum that would be taxable. So when you're looking at lump sum and the retirement model that Helen's touched on a few times, the maximums that you'll see there will always be tax-free. And that obviously adjusts into proportion your pension, depending on how much lump sum you're taking. You do need to think carefully, though, about what that's going to mean long term. For example, your lump sum is tax-free, but that is also a one-off payment. That pension, whilst taxable, is going to be there with you every year for the rest of your life, and that could be another 20 or 30 years. So in terms of short term and tax, what that's going to mean to you at the point of retirement and what you'll do with your lump sum is one thing. You do need to carefully counterbalance that against where you will be in, say, 10, 15 years time, taking account tax, but also what your incomings and outgoings are going to be as well long term. And as Helen touched on at the start, how many UK holidays or foreign-based holidays you want to have as well. So do consider that carefully. Hope that's answered it. If you need any more specialist guidance, you'd need to go and speak to HMRC about it. Otherwise, I'll pass back to Catherine.
Thanks, Joe. That was great. We do get lots of questions from members just confirming the tax position, so it's really good to clarify. The next question we have for you, Helen. So members asked, if you retire before a backdated pay award is implemented, will your pension be adjusted once the award is implemented? So can you explain for us how that would work, please?
Sure. So when we finalise your pension, we use the figures that are provided by your employer with regards to your final pensionable earnings, if it's a final salary scheme, or your earnings at the point that you leave or retire. So once your pension's been finalised, you're always sent a finalisation statement to show you the amount of lump sum, if you've opted for any, and the amount of yearly pension that you will receive. However, if there is a backdated pay award that is then implemented after you've already left or retired from the scheme, we can write to you with information showing you the amendments that we've made to your pension, and we'll always detail that for you. So you're retiring based on the information that has been provided by employers with regards to your pay, but if there is a backdated pay award, then we can adjust your benefits for a later date. So I hope that's answered your question. And back to you, Catherine.
Thank you, Helen. That was great. Joe, a question for you. We are running out of time, so we'll just have a couple more, but someone has asked, do you carry on paying national insurance after you retire, but carry on working, I assume taking partial retirement? So if you're after age 66 or your state pension age, what's the position for us there, Joe, please?
So national insurance is, of course, not something that we administer directly, but in broad terms, there's a couple of things to consider. National insurance, any form of salaried earnings, you normally pay national insurance. Now, once you reach the point of claiming your state pension, that would ordinarily stop when you reach that point. You never pay national insurance on your pension. That's one thing that is interesting in terms of looking at your take-home pay when you're considering your pension. We talked about tax a second ago. When you're looking at your take-home pay, it is always worth considering on the pension side that you won't be paying national insurance out of that. Most of us, when we look at an income rate, we're used to salary and we're used to tax and national insurance coming out of that. And actually, national insurance is a reasonable deduction in itself. It's worth considering that, as the original question asker was obviously doing, in terms of what your actual take-home pay is going to be as well. In terms of specialist information, if you need anything more, you obviously need to speak to the National Insurance Office about that in terms of what deductions will be taken and when and how that will affect your position. But I hope that's given you some guidance in the meantime. Otherwise, I will pass back to Catherine.
Thank you, Joe. That was great. A question, again, that we get asked all the time about whether there's national insurance payable on pensions as well as tax. that is all we've got time for in terms of our questions today. We'll just pick up one last one as we close down. So someone has asked where you can find the recordings of pension awareness sessions that have been missed. They are all available on the Civil Service Pension Scheme website, which is civilservicepensionscheme.org.uk. And the Pension Awareness Month landing page you'll see in yellow immediately when you log on. And if you follow that link, that will take you through to the recordings and lots of other useful information about the resources that are available to help and support you when it comes to your civil service pension and retirement in general. Unfortunately, we can't answer all of the questions. We've had hundreds of them today that we haven't been able to get to, so apologies for that. But do remember, you can attend one of our Pension Power sessions at a time that's convenient to you. They run every single weekday, and you will have the opportunity to ask and have those questions answered on one of those sessions as well. Please also take some time to leave some feedback for today's session. Let us know how you found it. Was it useful? Are there other things that you're looking for from us to support you with your pension and your retirement journey as well? We do use your feedback to shape any future events that we provide, so we do take on board your opinions and what you think. So we'll wrap things up for today there. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. I do hope that you've found the session useful and it's given you some food for thought for the future. We'll leave it there for today. Have a great afternoon, everyone, and bye for now.